All right, we're recording.
Good.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, Jennifer.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm excited to do this interview. So this is an interview with Katy Swafford, who is what is your title at Eidetic Institute?
Director, I think, founder and director.
Okay, founder and director of Eidetic Institute. And I guess just to get us started, what is your approach, both personally and organizationally, to transformation?
Well, they are the same, whether it's personal transformation or organizational transformation. I see transformation is about change, about moving from a past into the future. And that happens with a return to nature. We get into trouble personally or as an organization when we try to structure too much and conflicts and personalities, and we get our willpower all tied up in that. And the transformation is really to go back to nature, back to ourselves, to reconnect with ourselves and with each other in an organic, natural way. It's really the way that kids relate. It shouldn't be that hard, but we learn to be different. We learn to get in our own way. So I see transformation as a reestablishing connection, and out of that comes naturally comes new ideas, new events, new ways of doing things, and new ways of connecting.
And so how would you either more in depth describe or additionally describe how creativity works its way into your transformation process?
Creativity is transformation. It's the result of transformation of the process, that as we in personal work, as we see anything in our lives, we see a tree outside, we see something inside, we see another person, that ignites a response in our physical response in our bodies, and then that gets expressed in the world as physical movement, but also as imagination, as creativity. So the product of life, of nature, of seeing and experiencing and moving is creativity. And so transformation is happening as you create something new.
And so you are the founder and director of the Eidetic Institute. Can you talk a little bit about what eidetic imagery is?
Yes.
Just to include us all in.
An eidetic image is a special type of image in that it comes from inside. The word eidetic comes from the Greek word eidos, which is an unseen essence that's present in all things. So it's consciousness. One description, the Greeks talked about this, the eidos as the center of the psyche and the soul of man. And an eidetic image is a picture of that to make it visible. And so when you see an eidetic image, you're seeing a picture of your own mind and a picture of nature, a picture of spirit in terms of mythical characters and mythical stories and such, but those are to make it visible so we can see it.
Is there a real brief eidetic image that you could share with us just so we get an idea as we're moving through this conversation?
Sure. There are hundreds, lots of them. Images from nature are a good entry point, I think. So if I usually give a little, relax and be comfortable. Doesn't take much. There's no particular position, but just settle and become comfortable. You can close your eyes or not. And see that you are sitting on a hilltop, looking up at the midnight blue sky, through the trees at the midnight blue sky. It's peaceful and relaxing. Give the image time to form. Sometimes people get an instant picture, and others, sometimes you may have to sort through memories, but there'll be one of those memories will kind of develop into, take on a life of its own, and that's the eidetic version. What'd you see?
So I saw, it did take me a minute to get a little settled, but I could feel a ground under where I was sitting. And I saw, it was like two trees, but I just saw the branches. And it was green, and they were kind of letting me see through. And I could just see it was like a deep navy blue sky. So.
Yeah, everybody will see something different because it comes from each person, from deep within our own psyche, our own experience. I've done this image a lot, but this time I saw myself sitting on a hilltop, and at first I was following the instructions and looking up through the trees. You notice I started to say something and I backed up. It's because I was sitting on a hilltop with no trees. But the image is supposed to be looking up through the trees. So I backed up and said that, which is something about the image. It's not so structured. You can't make a mistake. There's no wrong answers. There's nothing you're supposed to see. And there's no interpretation. What yours means is exactly what you saw. It means you saw that. And it means that I saw something different. And that's it. And it may have some personal meaning for you or for me. As I was seeing it today, I thought, my gosh, it's just so clear all around, and that is a feeling that I have, that is with me right now.
Whereas I felt like my visual was just a little obstructed. Like I could see the sky, but my view was a little protected by the branches.
Yeah. And it's important not to go too far into interpretation with that, but there is a way that reflects what's going on with you right now. And that could be something completely trivial and temporary, like the 6 things you have to do in the hour after you do this interview, or it could be some huge developmental obstruction that we're going to explore later, So it means something, but we don't know what it is yet. And it's really important not to make too much of it too soon.
And so in the context of creativity and transformation, the exploration process and not landing so quickly on one outcome or this is it, is part of the process.
It's an important, that's an important point. It's not about the meaning. The model is that of Dr. Akhtar Ahsan, and it's the ISM, the image, and then the somatic response, and then meaning. And don't rush to meaning. Lots of our psychotherapies and Personal growth is to discover meaning.
Yeah.
You know, and in this work, the meaning sort of happens, but it's a product, an outcome or result of the experience. And that's the biggest difference with an eidetic image versus a guided image. We've all done guided image. Guided images are structured by someone else. See yourself taking a trip to the beach so that you can relax. Yeah, there's a goal, and somebody will start with an image, and even an eidetic image, you'll see the eidetic and say, oh, I know what. So look at the trees and see what the obstruction is, and make all these suggestions, and that's not the process.
So so when you give these images, when you give an image to a client or someone in training, what is your role if not, what is your role within that process?
I consider myself a storyteller, and that means I open the image. The images, there's kind of scripts, and you can branch off from that, but even as much as I've done this, I pretty much stick to the script, because it's like a poem. They've been carefully designed not to trigger the cognitive mind and take a turn, so that it opens imagination without attracting the attention of the cognitive mind that would want to interpret it. So it's about pure experience.
And you said the images were designed. Where did they come from, or how did you come into this work?
Yeah, the originator, or the person who pulled all this together, is Dr. Ahsen, Ahsen, and he's from India or Pakistan, before or after partition, and he came to the United States in the 50s and lived in Yonkers, New York, until he died a few years ago. And they couldn't tell whether he was going to go into philosophy or into psychology. And gratefully for us, he picked psychology. And so he studied mythology, because he's certainly familiar with Hindu mythology and Muslim religion, and studied the major religions of our culture and Western culture. So religion, culture, spirituality of all sorts, mythology, and science. Part of this is that the images are physical. There's a mythic level or spiritual level. There's also a physical level. And that means that physical level, like physics, like water runs downhill, like ice absorbs heat, that level of physical, how our bodies work, heartbeats and muscle tensions and such. And those are always parallel processes. What's going on in the body is going on in consciousness. What's going on in consciousness is going on in the body.
And that sounds really different from what I've studied about Jung. Can you talk about the difference there?
Yeah, it is different. They sound very similar, and there actually are a few connections, or there's some connections. But Octor never leaves the body. So when he talks about archetypes, he's talking about the elements: earth, air, fire, water. And then all of the images that come out of that are archetypes: Aphrodite and all of the mythic characters. Jung took a step away from the body. He added a level of abstraction when he started talking about symbols and particular archetypes, the good mother, and Octor Mother is a good example, because Octor doesn't talk about the good mother. He talks about your mother, your real biological, that woman that lives across town, mother, you know, and finding the resources in her, in her biological self, her spiritual self. She passed on her DNA, and she passed on her the quality of being alive, her life. And then through development, the interactions between the two of you and history and all that, we get our historical mother, but under that is their biological mother. And when there's generational trauma or problems, there's even an ancestral mother, the original mother. But it's your bloodline. Mm-hmm. That's so fascinating to me, to recognize there really was such a person. Mm-hmm. My mother's mother, I'm okay with that. My mother's mother's mother. Yeah, she was born on a boat coming from Germany in Galveston Harbor, you know, but then her mother and her mother's mother and her mother's mother. Back somewhere there really was a biological being that is the reason I'm here.
And even when you were drawing that distinction where you said the good mother and then you said your mother, there was like the animated piece of it took hold as soon as you said your mother. Like I felt there was something in me that kind of responded, because good mother is like this, I don't know, like it's frozen or something.
Yeah, right. And we think of your mother as our historical mother. That's I think that's the shock. Mm-hmm. But there's more to it than that. And that's kind of the difference. Our historical mother is a product of our interactions and her history, you know, and what happened to her growing up and in her life and how she responded to that. And our interactions with her, our birth order, all of that stuff that we study, you know, that makes a difference. But that's only part of the story.
Well, and even when you're drawing it back through the lineage, part of what I'm hearing is like this capacity for empathy.
Yes.
Which takes us out of that blame place we can easily go, right. Which doesn't really get anybody anywhere anyway.
No, it doesn't help, and it actually causes trouble. And so much of therapy is about dealing with, sword fighting with our historical mother, coming to understand and to forgive and to build on and to, you know, all of that's fine. Or you could just recover, restore her biological nature.
Her possibilities.
Her possibilities. It's her potentials, her possibilities. And they are biologically contained in her. Even if she didn't act on them, you know? Yeah. She didn't become who she could have been. Yeah. But she passed on the DNA before things got so screwed up.
And in a larger context, because we're talking about like a family system here, kind of looking into it, how does systems theory relate or work within the eidetic theory, eidetic image theory?
You know, my early training was in family therapy and systems theory, and I really appreciate that because it gave me an understanding of the fundamental principles of systems theory that applies to families. One of those is circular causality. If you're standing in a circle holding hands, who's responsible for that being a circle? Everybody. Whose fault is it? It's a circle. Everybody. And if one moves, it moves everybody, you know? So that circular causality fits with an eidetic image. It's a reciprocal causality. The circle is between the sensory input of seeing an image and the way our brain is structured, which produces the chemical messengers and and electrical nerve jangles and such. So an image, seeing, the act of seeing creates a body response. And then if you have a body response, there's an image attached. And that's part of the work that you say, oh, I'm feeling anxious, say. And you'll say, and I will say to that person, I say, but where do you experience that anxiety? Maybe my chest is tight or my stomach feels funny. See that as an image.
So you can go both ways.
You go both ways. And that reciprocal circle is the basic principles of family therapy and systems therapy, systems thinking.
Okay.
And it's just hand in glove right down the line.
And how do you know when a client, because everyone, I suppose, expresses themselves uniquely. How do you know, do you see what they see? How do you know when they're in an image or if they're making it up? How can you tell?
If I can't see it, actually see it, they're making it up. You know, I mean, if they're telling me about it, they're kind of telling me a story about it, but I can't see it. They're constructing it.
Okay.
They're thinking about it. Yeah, it comes from their head. But when they're saying, I see a tree and it's got a big round central trunk, I can see that. I look and I see a tree, and I see a tree with a big round central trunk. Yep. So
it is
and I
like
may ask for more.
It is like telling a story. Like when someone is telling me a story, I see what they're telling me.
What they see. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't interrupt you. Sorry.
No. And when part of the use of this is after someone sees an image, I always write the images down, by the way, because I always wish I had if I don't, because you can tell the story when the person tells you what they see, they're writing a script for you. It's like the scene opens and Jennifer is sitting on a mountain top and the trees are tall and dark and they're kind of protecting or obstructing. I'd be very careful to use your words.
Okay. So
you can see through them and it's a midnight blue color, literally the words you used. And I would say them back to you. It's kind of like a reflecting technique from some, in therapies that I say what you said. And it is so, I don't know, comforting to hear your words come back. What was it like to hear me say, Jennifer saw this?
It is comforting to hear it. And I also think that when you're in an image and you're sharing the image with words, I don't hear myself as well as when you say it back to me and I'm like, oh, this is really out there. So somebody heard it and received it and felt it.
Yeah. That's part of the reciprocal thing of you see it, you experience it, you express it. And by expressing means you tell me what you saw. You might write or draw or do something else to express it. And I hear you, same sensory input process, and I receive what you said. And then I respond to you by telling you your story. So there's this reciprocal process of connection. It is empathy.
And so that's how you are the storyteller, as in your role is the storyteller to open the image and then to listen and then to be able to receive it and then to tell the story again.
I hear it and then you see it and you tell it, and I hear you tell it and I receive it and I tell you what I heard. So we've got a relationship. We've got a reciprocal response.
I have a couple more questions, but I think one of the key pieces I know we've talked about either today or at another time is this point of connection or contact. Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of doing images?
Sure. The point of contact happens when seeing makes contact with the body. It's that link between I see it, I feel it.
Okay.
That I'm in contact with it. So I see the tree and I experience it, I'm in contact with the tree. And that's the same with a person. I see you, I hear you, and I respond to you. That means I'm connected. At first is contact, and then you sustain the contact, and it becomes a connection longer term.
And so that's that returning to nature, our nature, when we are participating at that level of contact versus, seeing something and not having it be in our body, having it, not feeling it. Is that?
Yes. And if you see something and you think about it, you're not really in contact with it. There's not a feeling that goes with, or a body response that goes to it. You may have a response to your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
An example I like of that is to see a sunset. Most of us we've all seen sunsets and generally have a positive response. Oh, that's awesome. Wow, look at that. Occasionally somebody will say, and that's contact. They feel it, they see the sunset, and their body responds automatically, and it's pleasant. Another possibility, if someone has trauma around that, is they see a sunset and they think, yeah, but I've always had to work nights and I went to work at 3:00 and I never get to see the sunset. And then they'll have a bad feeling to the thought.
So that is a body response to the thought, not to the image?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And what do you do?
Ask for the image.
Okay, you go back to the image.
Look at the sunset. While you're looking at it, how does your body respond? And they may be stubborn. They may go with, yeah, but I didn't have a chance to see the sunset. And, mm-hmm. And say, well, what if you do it now? Take a look.
So that's really.
Remember a sunset as a kid? There was one.
And so that's really what you're saying in the beginning, is how we get in our own way of being creative beings.
Right.
We get wrapped in these loops in our head, or we're thinking about thinking versus being in the image.
And creativity in expression, when you're talking about transformation, the making changes comes from, I see the sunset, I have that awesome experience of awe and wonder, and then I do something to express that. And that means that the image has biochemically created a response in my body, neurotransmitters and mirror neurons and all of the works of that. And having that experience creates a movement. I feel like doing something. And I have an imagination. Oh, that reminds me of that particular color. I just love that kind of periwinkle, color. And I want to choose that, make something out of it. Quilting is one of my expressions of my experiences. And so to create something in the world, to manifest something in the world out of that automatic body response. And the
so what happens in the image is real, just as if it were happening in front of me. I'm having the chemical reaction and emotions and feelings.
Right.
And
it's just, imagination is reality. Mm-hmm. That's the deal. Yeah, that's the deal. Yeah, when you see something and you feel something, you are currently having that experience. Your brain
And
doesn't know the difference. The brain's just this little gray thing that follows instructions and sends messengers to tell the body what to do. You know?
well, so the therapeutic potential for this is huge because you can work with people who can't work with the real life people, or you can work with
That's right.
individuals who are needing to do work with a parent who's deceased. You can still do that
Absolutely.
because they can imagine it
Absolutely.
to be true.
Right. And they
And
will have the
safe, like
same
what if they have
experience.
a violent, yeah.
Yes, and it's an important issue because if they had a violent, abusive parent, to deal with the history of that is just that was wrong. You know, you can understand it, I guess, sort of, but it was wrong and it hurt you.
Mhm.
And you can forgive them, and there's things, but it doesn't change it at the deepest level. Whereas if you see that parent, um, and there's a series of parental images that you go through to discover internal resources of the parent.
Mm.
And when you make contact with those internal resources of the genetic parent, not the historical parent, but the genetic biological parent, it activates those resources in you. And the problem with trauma, what happened was bad, no doubt. But what makes it last makes a trauma last is that you lost contact with important resources that you need. You know, if you were getting hit, you didn't learn to trust, you know, and you didn't have the experience of father or mother as in their natural role, you know, in their nurturing role or their protective role. Mothers bring the child into the world, fathers take the child out into the world. And when something goes wrong with that, the person kind of can't go into the world. They keep trying and trying and trying.
And it's interesting because there's two pieces I hear kind of circulating in some just in psychology in general, and one is this idea of always looking for the positive. Well, you can look for it, but if you don't feel it, it doesn't work. And
Yeah.
then the other is this: there's so many trauma models to work with, and so what are the possibilities that happen in Eidetics that are different and unique versus other trauma models?
There are kind of three versions of trauma models in Eidetics. And one of them is developmental trauma, which is what we were talking about when a parent or developmental history has been bad in some kind of way. It's been abusive, neglectful, things happen. And the big difference with this, the big difference is looking behind the trauma for what was missing.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of that there's part of what got developed, what you did develop, your survival mechanisms, your coping strategies, your body armor to defend against the bad stuff. But the other side of that is what didn't happen. Because you were surviving, you didn't learn to connect with Father, which may turn up in your life as not able to connect with men or authority figures or to count on strong people. You learn to handle that being overpowered some way, one way or another. And so to come into your own power, you need to go back to the roots, back to where, to your biological chain, and restore the connection, make contact with it, restore the experience. There's a line in one of Dr. Austin's books. He says, no doubt all fathers, I may not get the quote right, all fathers have their problems, but to the child who does not ugh, see the father's, I don't think he says positive aspects. Anyway, the line is, there's no relief to the suffering. That
Because
gratitude.
we have to have that. We have to have that connection.
Yeah, otherwise we suffer eternally. And so the developmental trauma work is about resilience, recovering, restoring the reactivating the potentials.
And it seems, in terms of like a transformation and creativity, it's like when we don't have those connections, when we have the gaps between, if we have this gap of not being connected to our resource, then we're stuck and we can't create in the world in some way, or
no, you're not free in the same way. And that's where play comes in. That when you are free, there's a playful quality, then your actions are creative in nature and there's playfulness. So creativity and playfulness being expressed is transformation in my book. It has transformed your experience. Your experience has transformed, and that you've gone from being stuck and suffering forever to being released from that. And having, one of my clients said, I've worked on this for years, but I feel like I got my father back. You know, that he was, he had done some bad things and he hadn't been a very good father, and that had hurt his child. And she'd been going to therapy and dealing with that and forgiving him and that, but she didn't really have the experience of my father. And she felt like, she says, I saw myself crawl up in, I ran to him and he picked me up and held me in his arms, his father coming home in the evening image. And he held me, and I could feel his chest and feel his whiskers on his face and smell his hair. And so it's sensory input. And she calmed down in a way that she hadn't probably ever. It's powerful work. I'm excited about it.
It is powerful, and it seems like it has many uses beyond therapy. Personally, organizationally, I think it's got a lot of potential.
I think it can certainly be used therapeutically by a therapist for trauma work and that kind of thing. But it really is a theory of consciousness rather more than psychology. And it's going on all the time. It's the way the world works. And it has uses for certainly personal growth and everyday life and reorganizing organizations. I've worked with organizations, some small company, and I asked, there were only 3 people in the company and they all came for a workshop. We did an intensive, and I asked them to see your company as an image. And then they shared their images, and they had similar and different views, but we had some talking points that if I had asked them to analyze their company, and tell me what's going on and what's the structure, they couldn't do it. And they would have started to fight probably, But I asked them to see it as an image, because there's no arguing with that. You saw what you saw.
So they felt what you felt, right?
And felt what you felt. And then when you tell me, I could seeing what you saw, I feel the same way, So it immediately makes the empathy connection. And then you're having a whole different conversation.
Maybe even a conversation.
You're having a conversation, exactly.
Maybe, because I think about how that goes in other formats.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that you feel is pertinent to kind of share within the scope of this particular conversation?
I'm satisfied. I feel like we've covered some important ground, and I use my own experience of that. I think I've gotten to say what I wanted to say.
Okay, I do too. I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
You are very welcome. Thank you.
All right.